Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. It has been an absolute day of failure today for the SNP. We've seen already how they've failed at an election, how they've failed with a health secretary, how they're failing in the NHS generally. And now we're going to take a look at education. And guess what? Yep, it's failing. It's gone from what was a world-leading, wonderful education system, admired around the world, to one that is now so bad that even the SNP are so embarrassed by it that they refuse to publish league tables. It is that appalling. 17 years nearly of education policy under this party has resulted in an entire generation being failed in education. And it's only getting worse. It's time to change this. Even SNP voters must see that they're destroying their children's future and that the things need to change. We'll take a look at this to see what the latest figures are showing and to show how bad not only it is, but how much worse it's going to get. Here goes. So, Scottish education has declined under the Nats as party told results should be an urgent wake-up call. Well, we know it's declined. We can see time and time again, which is why, of course, Sturgeon herself stopped publishing the results onto the International League tables, the PISA tables and that, because they were so embarrassingly bad. The fall was horrendous, simply because they want a stupid, uneducated population. If you have an uneducated population, you have fewer people able to question the very things you're doing. It is cynical, but it is deliberate. And that is why education in Scotland is so appallingly bad. A new analysis of classroom performance in Scotland has been branded disappointing. And Humza Yousaf's party has been told that education has barely been an afterthought. They don't care. They literally don't care. They are deliberately running it down. They know what they're doing. This isn't a byproduct of other things. This is deliberate policy. Scotland's education scores in key international ranking have been disappointing, a prominent think tank has said, ahead of the latest release, which is expected next month. Scottish Tories say the results make it clear that improving school standards has been barely an afterthought for the SNP, as officials at the Institute for Fiscal Studies identified maths and science as areas of concern. STEM is the core of all economies. You know, it's great to have artists, it's great to have people who are literate and able to write down thoughts and expressions and emotions and all that. But ultimately, for any economy to thrive, it needs the STEM subjects. Science, technology, education, maths are the key and should be the core of all education policy. The PISA figures are compiled by the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development, the OECD, every 3 years. These are tracking standards in reading, maths and science. The Scottish report for 2022 is expected to be released next month. However, the IFS has said it is clear that there's been a long-term decline in both maths and science since 2006. And that was the year before the SNP took office north of the border. So the entire decline has happened entirely since the SNP have taken over. The decline has been since 2006. They took over early 2007 and then it's crashed through the floor. So it's quite clear that it is not down to the previous government. It is not down to Westminster. It is not down to aliens. It is down to one particular reason. That reason, of course, is the Scottish National Party. Scottish Conservative Education spokesman Liam Kerr said that the report should act as an urgent wake-up call for the Scottish Government, adding they said education would be a priority, and we know that that is quite clearly a lie. But the evidence is indisputable that for the SNP it has been barely an afterthought, he said. Schools have been pushed to breaking point on the SNP's watch as successive education secretaries have failed to properly resource them. The result is a decline in performance, and typically under the SNP it is the poorest pupils who are suffering the most, and the attainment gap has widened as a result. Now, of course, you've got your current secretary there, Jenny Gilruth, Spinning Jenny, as we call her. who's trying to make everything out to be wonderful. But in fact, she, as an ex-teacher, you'd think would know exactly what to do and what was needed and what she needed to resource. And she isn't doing it. But then she's SNP. So firstly, probably not that bright. And secondly, is going along with the party line that education must, in Scotland, be destroyed. They cannot have an educated workforce to question them. Between 2006 and 2012, the IFS said Scottish scores in maths and science were well above the OECD average, but they've since declined, while reading performance has remained around the same level. These figures also show a wide gap between the richest and poorest, but then it was ever thus, wasn't it? It was always thus. Them with the money could pay for the private education. They were going to get a better education. It's measuring between 77 and 91 PISA points in all three subjects, similar to the average for the UK as a whole. More well-off students, the report found, also underperform when compared to their English counterparts in maths and science. So, although being rich in Scotland gives you an educational advantage over poorer Scots, just because you're rich in Scotland means you're still behind and below the English average. That is a very surprising thing, because the English average includes the private schools as well as the state schools. So it seems very very bad that, although being wealthier in Scotland will give you a better education than most Scots, and you're still below the English average with all the state schools in England. That is bad. That is showing how bad education is in Scotland. Andrew McKendrick, a research economist at the IFS, and one of the authors' reports said the performance of Scottish pupils in international PISA tests has been disappointing, particularly in maths and science. He said Scotland has gone from a position of high performer to an average performer. I would suggest it's so bad it's below average. I bet it's below the halfway mark now. The gap between rich and poor is slightly narrower than in England, but only because richer Scot pupils score lower than their English counterparts, as I mentioned. He said large increases in spending and big reforms, such as the Curriculum for Excellence, do not seem to have translated into higher performance in these core subjects, though Scottish pupils did perform well in a test of global competence, which may be measuring the impact of the new curriculum. But nothing that's going to stand out and say, look, well done to us. You're still worse, way worse than it was before. New PISA data will be published next month. It will allow us to see whether Scotland's declining trend has continued over time. And I'm going to make a prediction that when it is published, we'll come back and do this in a month's time. When it is published, I bet it has fallen yet again. I bet it is a continual downward trend. There is no recovery from this, because you're getting worse and worse teachers in worse and worse schools continually, because no one's putting the resources in. So the good teachers are leaving, going south of the border, working there where there's lower physicality between pupils and teachers for a start. And also the schools seem to be better maintained. You're not having great big gaping holes in roofs and, power cuts and leaks and things like that. In 2018, Scotland's pupils ranked 4th out of 27 countries in a cognitive test of their understanding of global issues, with an average score of 534. But Scotland ranked behind Canada, Singapore and Hong Kong, and was well above the average. But this was on just the global issues, the things that they're trying to push. Hey kids, climate change, sexualities, blah, 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 blah. Ask them about maths and science, and no. You can talk about the bollocks and the spin and the woke bollocks, but you can't teach them maths and sciences. And ultimately, being woke ain't paying the bills. Understanding maths and sciences does. The SNP must now act to reverse this decline and build an education system that gives every child the opportunities they deserve and the best possible start in life. The Scottish Government has been contacted for comment, but comment came there none, because they are so very ashamed of what they have done to a once marvellous education system. They have totally destroyed it out of deliberate policy. There we go. Coming up, rounding off, and we'll finish the video. So the SNP are destroying education. Who'd have thought it, eh? Who'd have thought that would possibly have happened? But then a whole series of morons as Education Secretary doesn't really help. The trouble is, you've got a government of morons. You've got a government with nobody with any intelligence. They have a strange hidden Marxist agenda. They want to put everything down and destroy everything so that they represent the only path to true freedom, the only path to wealth, the only path to health. Everything has got to go through the SNP, single party state system. And it is failing because the people of Scotland are waking up. They are smelling the coffee. They are seeing what a dangerous bunch the SNP are. And they are finally rejecting them. We see that election after election after election. It's fantastic to watch. Anyway, I should stop there. Thank you very much for watching. I hope I have suitably frightened you if you have children or grandchildren at school. And I hope that you now will see that something needs to change. And that something, of course, is government. Till next time, stay safe, stay well, and I shall speak to you later. Bye.